Good morning. Welcome. This session of Alumni Weekend is also being live streamed as part of the online alumni series. And I am Kelly Courtney. I'm a Sloan Fellow from the best class ever of 2008. And boy, it is my pleasure to be here today to introduce Professor Rigobon. All of you know he was fond of having props. For whatever reason, and despite the fact that I worked for somebody who was very successful in economics, I often got picked on with a prop where my classmates would get to pick on me a little bit. Yes. So here I am, a little payback here, Professor. Happy to be here today.
Yes, go.
Roberto Rigobon is the Society of Sloan Fellows Professor of Management and a Professor of Applied Economics at MIT Sloan. He's also Research Associate at the National Bureau of Economic Research and member of Census Bureau Scientific Advisory Committee and visiting professor of IESA. Professor Rigobon is a Venezuelan economist whose areas of research are international economics, monetary economics, and development economics. He focuses on the cause of balance payment crisis, financial crisis, and the propagation across countries, the phenomenon known as contagion. Currently, he studies properties of international pricing practices, trying to produce alternative measures of inflation. He's one of the two founding members of the Billion Prices Project and co-founder of Price Stats. Professor Rigobon joins us today to talk about a new economic framework called PROMISE that, when integrated across dimensions of people, relationships, organizations, markets, society, institutions, and the environment, could help create a more sustainable world. Please join me in welcoming the very proud father of Daniel, who just graduated from MIT yesterday.
Yes, I did. So thank you so much. Actually, Kelly was a steward in your class of Sloan Fellows. Yeah, so the fact that that class was able to graduate, the fact that Stewart was one of the members, reflects that the other part has to be the best one. Is that okay? Stewart is here, and I don't know how we allowed these people in the building. We make the mistake once to admitting them, but then they keep coming, and somehow it is here. First, I want to know if there's anyone that is on their 50th year reunion. Anyone that is 50 years? 50, 50. Oh, you're 50? Longer than that? Congratulations.
How about 60?
You are 60? Oh, my God! You have to be kidding me. Oh, my God, you have to be kidding me. You don't look a year older of 25. Anyways, let's take a selfie. This is unique. We will put that on the web. Thank you. Actually, I'm never invited to reunions. So it's my classmates say that, I only talk about my research and that I cannot talk about anything else, and that, that they all know my jokes already. So it's just like, why invite me? So I am never getting invited to the reunion. Now, the typical MIT student will solve that by hacking into the list and putting your name there. I am not into that. I'm more into the fake reunion kind of thing. So what I do is I convince people to come to one single room, usually on a Saturday, to talk about my research. So I want to welcome you to my fake 21st reunion. I want to talk about something that I have been working with Jason J. Jason J is the head of the director of the sustainability initiative here. For a long time, we have been trying to think about what makes a society sustainable, but sustainable in a very broad sense. And this framework that we're going to show you, it's kind of at the beginning, so we have not ended. But I think it's a very nice way of thinking about what is our role, what is our purpose in general, and what are the things that matter. So what I want to do is to share with you a little bit of that and how that research is evolving. So PROMISE actually stands for several aspects, or all the dimensions that we think it matters. So the P for personal aspects, R for relationships, O for organizations, N for the markets and the economy, I for the quality of institutions and culture, S for social and political, and E for the environment. When you think about it, for many, many years, I think that we had a very narrow definition of sustainability. We were mostly concentrated on environmental issues. Through time, we realized that solving some of the problems of the environment will cause conflicts on the society. And then we realized that that has problems with economics and so on. And today, there's a tremendous emphasis about the quality of jobs and how those jobs will exist in the future, given that what we have artificial intelligence. And if you think about it, what that is doing is having massive improvements in economics and technology, and what are the implications of that, both on organizations and also personal level, specifically on the personal level. By the way, all the slides will be available online, so you can stop taking pictures. Is that okay? I mean, you can take pictures only if you want to take this picture. Yeah, so I have been practicing the dancing. No, you lost the chance. I'm sorry. So one nice thing about this framework that Jason and I have been working is the fact that we can think about first what means sustainability within each of these dimensions. And to do this, we have had many people that have helped through the years. For example, for a long time, Ashley Ithcott was helping us. I know that she must be here somewhere. But there it is, Ashley. There it is. So Ashley actually helped us a lot understand on personal issues and relationship issues, because I am a cold-hearted economist bastard. Is that okay? So I mostly only care about money. And then Ashley says, do you care about people? Yeah, if they can get me more money. And then so I said, there's only 2 rules for economists. 1, make a lot of money. Rule 2, no, do not forget rule number 1. Anyways, so in some sense, this has been an effort that has been going on for a long, long time. And the idea is to try first to understand what it means to be sustainable within each of them. And we want to have relatively simple rules to understand that in order to be able to share this with everybody. So for example, one that I love is about, there's some that we have understood. For example, on the environment, we have what is called the DAYS principles. And the idea is, again, it's a very simple one. If we want to protect the world from disaster, the pollution that goes in has to be less than the pollution that we can clean. It's a super simple principle. Everybody can understand it. And it has a stock and a flow. And all of those that you took classes with John Sterman, you remember John Sterman? That really, that really negative guy about humankind. Yeah. So this is similar to the system dynamics. You remember? Yeah, it's so cool, because now we can dynamically model the system. Is that okay? But truly, it's a very simple way to think about the world, and they are very simple rules. And the interesting thing is that when you go along all these dimensions, we can actually do something very similar for all of them. For example, in economics, when you're thinking about the debt of the government, you will have one that the stock of the debt of the government increases with our expenditures and reduces with our taxation. And again, when we think about the United States today, the US had 60% debt before the financial crisis. That has increased to about 105 right now, give or take. I mean, this depends on how you count the GDP. But anyway, it's around 105. And with the program that the United States is embarking by reducing taxes and increasing expenditures, this is very likely to continue to go up. Can it continue to go up the next 2 years, 3 years? Of course it can. The US has a lot of room to increase the stock of debt. Can that go forever? Sorry, it can't. So at some point in time, we will need to pay the debt or default on it, which is a form of payment, by the way. So Yeah, we Latinos prefer the second one. Is that okay? If you are from Brazil, you say like, paying the debt, yeah, the way to pay the debt is to tax bondholders 100%. It's called default, but anyway, it's a minor thing. But one of the things that we're doing is that going along all of these dimensions, trying to understand what are the principles. The second thing that is very nice about this framework is to understand what do you care about. If I ask you about all of this, and I said, well, do you care about personal aspects? In my end, I give you 100 points and you need to distribute them. What is very interesting is that almost everybody puts weights on everything. You care about personal aspects, you care about your relationships, you care about the organizations that you want them to be sustainable, where the jobs are dignified, for example. You care about the economy to be efficient. You care about institutions. You care about the political system. You care about social outcomes. You care about poverty. You will care about the environment. You will put weights on everything. Of course, the second implication of that is that you realize that we have different views. For example, Jason is a tree hugger. Is that okay? So he puts like 94 and then 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Is that okay? And you said, you have kids. Okay, 1.25. And then so he just likes the environment. And the beauty of actually going through this process is to first realize that we have very different values. I think that in the world, we do have different values, but we very rarely highlight the fact that all of them are valid. What we do in the world today is mostly to tell you what I hate about you. Truly. In Europe right now, this is destroying a tremendous important process of unification. We're just telling the Italians what we don't like about the Italians. And to be honest, there's a lot not to like from us, the Italians, okay? It's a lot. I mean, like, we are always late. Yes, I understand. But there's a lot to love. The place that invented Nutella, I mean, give me a break. I mean, this is worth it. Is that okay? I mean, just for that fact, we need to keep Italy alive. But today, instead of actually realizing our differences and accepting our differences, we do not spend time understanding each other. And I think that a very important aspect of this, of doing this exercise, is to realize that we have different opinions, that we have different values. But still, we need to work together. And therefore, when you realize that we just have put different weights, now the discussion, the narrative changes on how to get agreement as opposed to what I don't like about you. You move from a destructive agenda to a constructive one. The third aspect that I love about this, which is actually a lot of the research that I have been doing, is how do you measure? It happens to be that we do not measure stocks with the same certainty and with the same quality. So what happens is that the quality of measurement on economic outcomes is relatively good. So the sales on your company can be measured relatively well. I mean, when you think about it, we kind of do that properly. And we measure profits relatively well. I measure your salaries relatively well. I measure your assets relatively well. So economic outcomes tend to be very well measured. How do you measure the quality of a relationship? We don't. We only measure when the relationships are broken. When you have a divorce or a partnership is broken. When you don't speak to your friends or you don't speak to your kids. How do we measure the quality or the impact that we have in the environment? Very rarely. We just measure when the lake is lost. We don't measure happiness. We measure extreme outcomes of sadness, on depression and suicides. We do not measure consumption of drugs. We only measure the number of kids that have to be revived when they enter an emergency room. We measure very, very badly. So if you measure so badly, how can we actually make good decisions? And the second thing that happens is that even though our motivation will depend on our values, our actions will respond to incentives. And incentives are attached to things that we measure. So no wonder why we spend so much time on trying to achieve success, but very little time trying to achieve fulfillment. And success is about the size of the car and the house and the money and the bank account. and your power and your influence. And fulfillment will be more or less what you do for others. That's really hard to measure. And because we don't measure, we assume it's irrelevant. And we act as if it's irrelevant. And at the end of the day, we get to an environment that looks exactly what we have today, where the decisions on the firms and the decisions on the families are driven by a different set of incentives. So if we can change the measurement, I think we can have a tremendous impact. So let me just tell you a little bit what we are doing. So these are all the projects where I'm involved. So some of you have heard me say a little bit about the Billion Prizes project. This is a job that I worked with Alberto Cavallo many years ago. Still is going on. We produce daily inflation rates for many, many countries. We also produce measures of demand. We are working on a project that is called Aggregate Confusion, which I'm going to talk. That's the ACP. The other one is Political Collaboration Index. I would like to know how divisive the political rhetoric is. And there I have many other projects. But let me just talk about two of them. So first, the Billion Prizes project. I'm going to go really fast about this. These are all the places where we get data in one form or shape. And we track billions of items. And we try to produce daily inflation rates. One of the countries that was the first one where we started measuring was Argentina. So what we do is we go to the web and construct baskets from that. This is how the official inflation rate of Argentina looks like. It's hard to see, but this is about 8 years of data. This is what the government was reporting. This implies about 140% inflation rate cumulative in about 8 years. That is a very high inflation rate. When we actually measured the inflation rate, there was a tiny discrepancy. Our number was 640. You understand? I mean, so when the reporter was calling me, I said, Roberto, what is the discrepancy? I said, there's only one digit of difference from 140 to 640. I said, you know, it happens to be that it's a very relevant digit. But anyway, but for example, in Argentina, after the government, this was the expropriation that the Argentinians were subject by the government. You understand that pension funds are indexed to the blue line, not to the red line. The red line is exactly what is happening in their lives. But the pension funds increase on the blue line. So everything that you get on pensioners were expropriated. Bondholders were expropriated. So significant. And this is not a tiny expropriation. This is about 500% in an 8-year window. The government locally changed, and because of that, the new government actually, this is the statistics since the new government has started. We renormalized the data at the beginning, but there's actually no manipulation whatsoever today in Argentina. Argentina is going through problems again, but that's more or less because, you know, Argentina cannot spend 2 years without a crisis, okay? It's actually in their DNA. But now it's not about expropriation or lying. It's about different things. So, but most countries look like this. This will be the United States. Our inflation rates are very related to the official inflation rates. Let me tell you now about aggregate confusion, which is what I think I would like to spend most of the time. These are with different researchers. This is the team is incredibly big and different areas. I'm going to talk about one in particular where, you know, it's about women empowerment. But Julian and Florian are kind of and myself, we are the ones that are directing this. This is my first time ever working with Germans. It's probably the last one. I am usually on time, and they consistently say, Roberto, you were late. I am never on time. Never. It's super depressing. And when I am early, they are already there. Roberto, you were late. We agreed to talk at 9 a.m. Yeah, but we knew you were going to connect at 8:50, so we connected at 8:49. I cannot win a single one. Is that okay? So these are 2 postdocs. I'm going to get rid of them. Is that just like... But the first thing that we did was to try to understand, aggregate confusion is to try to measure ethical behavior of companies. We want to understand, not measuring economic outcomes, I want to understand how you treat your workers, what is the likelihood that you violate the law, what are the household stress and the stress that a particular company causes on others. So these are things that are much harder to measure than inflation rate. And what we're doing is first look at what exists in the world. There are many, many data providers, and they're trying all of them to measure ethical behavior. By the way, you know one of them, which is the credit ratings. For example, everyone here has a credit rating, okay? Well, not Stuart, because people that have these criminal records, they tend to have very low numbers. Exactly, he's Australian, so yeah, so there's no rating there. In any case, but the rating, all your credit scores, what they are doing is trying to make an assessment of your willingness to pay, not necessarily the ability, but your willingness to pay. And so you know that one. We do kind of similar things about, do you treat your workers nicely? What is your likelihood to treat them nicely? What is the likelihood that you use forced labor to produce shrimps? So this is, again, ethical behavior. What is the likelihood that your products are unsafe? And again, that's about ethical behavior. And one thing that is super depressing is that when you look at the data, one rating agency has almost nothing to do with the other. Every dot is supposed to be the same firm. And this is just at which quintile of the ranking they belong. Is a disaster. They're correlated about 30% only. And by the way, when you go to the raw data, and then you try to analyze, for example, issues like lobbying. Are you in Congress lobbying? That should be an easy thing to measure, don't you think? It's a yes or a no. Do I see you lobbying? Or, I mean, like, it sounds like a trivial measurement. They are negatively correlated. They are not even positive. So when we actually encountered this, we decided we need to understand the sources of the discrepancies. So the first thing that we did was to organize. This has taken several years, and again, there's many, many students that actually have worked on this. We have taken the attributes, the things that matter for us, which are aspects of the environment, aspects about your impact on the community, aspects about impact on the labor force, impact on your workers, your willingness to comply with the law, etc. So we have about 35 different types of attributes that we would like to measure. Now, every one of these rating agencies, they measure this differently. And so therefore, what they do is they construct approximations. Is that okay? So I do not measure the morale of my workers, but I can measure, for example, the turnover. That would be one. Or the other one will measure, for example, the scandals about sexual harassment. These are two different measures. They are not necessarily related. And the first thing that happens is that because they measure different things, we make measurement errors. Second is that these rating agencies have different attributes. They put different weights on what they care. And that implies that they are using different information. Even if they measure identically and perfectly, they will actually produce different ratings that will come from the fact that you have a different information set. And then lastly, and very importantly, at least to me, is that when they put this in one single ranking, these procedures create tremendous noise. And not only that, creates very improper behavior. Because what they tend to do is to average out. So I am a company, and I am using child labor to produce, and I have environmental impact on the other side. I can keep my rating constant by increasing a little bit more kids in production and polluting a little bit less. How do you feel about that? So a lot of these places, they're just producing competitions on the ranking, which implies that now the companies target the rating as opposed to targeting child labor and environmental impact. No one here will say that these two things are substitutes. Are you kidding me? Like, both are unacceptable. So the way we need to aggregate this data actually implies that we have to change the views. So let me tell you a little bit about measurement that we're doing. We're working on many projects, and I want to talk a bit about one. We are measuring women empowerment, household stress, mansplaining. Does anybody knows what mansplaining is? Raise your hand if you know what mansplaining is. No, I need to see it very high, the mansplaining. So you really know what mansplaining? Cara, do you know what mansplaining is? She doesn't, I know. No. Cara, let me explain you what truly mansplaining is. Is that okay? Like, for example, Cara, do you have kids?
I have 2, yes.
You have 2 kids. Is it hard to be in the labor force with 2 kids? Yes. Yes. Let me explain you exactly what it means. Is that okay? Let me explain you exactly what being a woman having 2 kids really is. That's what we call mansplaining. Is that okay? So that seems to be a little bit pervasive in humankind. But for example, with 2 people here, Mirad and Eric, we're trying to actually measure aspects of human trafficking and opioids. We're trying to measure job quality. We're trying to measure the likelihood that you violate water practices. This seems to be all over the place, no? Now, what is interesting about all of those is that they have the same mistake of measurement. Is that all of them, we measure too late, we measure too infrequently, we only concentrate on extreme events, like accidents or tragedies, and by the way, we tend to concentrate on irrelevant statistics, irrelevant measures. So what I want to do is just to show you one of them. So first, I'm going to talk about women empowerment, and the first thing that I always do, by the way, I don't know if you realize, but actually all this research is with somebody else. You know that, no? And why? It's because I do nothing. I just find Ashley, Mirad, and Eric, and I just find really smart people that are, super motivated. They do all the work. And then I take all the credit. I mean, it's just, life is super difficult. I mean, this is a super burden, you understand? I mean, getting all the money and I have to deal with all these celebrities that call me constantly. I mean, do you understand the burden that I am actually lifting from you? You're welcome, yes. So the first thing I do is I start talking to psychologists, for example, to understand, and this is about women empowerment, and say, like, how does discrimination take place? Can you tell me? We are a disaster on our language. We have no idea what we're talking about. This is the exact same event on the 29th of November, reported by 3 news outlets exactly at the same time. So one talks about Matt Lauer, complaint of inappropriate sexual behavior. The other one talks about alleged sexual misconduct. And the other one talks about sexual harassment. So what is it? Is inappropriate behavior? Is sexual harassment? Is misconduct? So what are we talking about? And furthermore, what this complicates is that the fact that we have a language that is so imprecise that when we ask a survey where you harass, people have no idea what it means. So we have the wrong surveys. We have no idea what we're measuring. So the first thing I did was to actually talk to psychologists. And there's a great, the reporters respond to the law. And therefore, they use what lawyers kind of indicate. And to be honest, since when lawyers have ever known what they talk about? Okay? So this will be the first one. So truly, their language is about things that they can be proved, have nothing to do with the process. Now, when you talk to psychologists, this is a Fitzgerald classification. What is very interesting is that she talks about gender hostility and the fact that you create an environment where you start making jokes that are inappropriate and they're hurtful for some and not others. By the way, that depends a lot on the culture. What is hurtful depends on the country, depends on the situation. And therefore, multinationals do need to solve this problem because it's not clear what will be insulting for one or for the other. By the way, we do that in the MBA classes every single day, don't we? So we are different cultures, we come and we behave differently. Well, except me that I insult equally everybody. But at least I am very politically correct. And but it's interesting that you start first from an area where you create a hostile environment, then you move to unwanted sexual attention, then you went to sexual coercion, where I actually specify if you don't do X, Y will not happen. By the way, a lot of times this is implicit as opposed to be explicit, and so I don't have to ask. So you understand how hard it is for a lawyer to prove that there was an implicit sexual coercion. And a lady that actually was raped, how can you prove it? We went to dinner, and it happens to be that in this particular company, going to dinner means that we are actually going to a hotel afterwards. I don't have to say it. It's implicit. You accept to go to the dinner, and then you're reforced. And I use the power that I'm a supervisor. In some sense, you have no way to say no. You feel that you have no way to say no, and therefore we end in the extremely bad environment. So truly, we are unable to prove, and we are unable to talk about the issue because our language is so imprecise. By the way, Fitzgerald actually, in her book, she talks a lot about also the fuzziness that exists. So not everything is that clear. But the beauty of looking at this process is that right now what we measure is mostly at the end. We measure either explicit coercion or we measure assault. And that, I don't know if you can think about anything later than a person going to a court complaining about sexual harassment. That sounds like we're measuring really super duper late. Is that okay? It's kind of the definition. So my question is, can we measure something in the process? And what we did was to start thinking about hostility. And can we measure hostility? And that can we change the behavior? So let me tell you a little bit about how we do it now. We have three sources mostly of measurement. One, we count number of women. And we do this in every place. We do this at MIT. And then when we actually look at the Sloan Fellows, we look, oh, we have 42% women. Wow, that's better than last year when it was 37. Yes. Well, since when moving from 37 to 42 will imply better treatment? Since when? That statistic is only meaningful when you are close to 0. Yeah, if you have no women, then, well, then you have no women. It's a very clear statistic. Is that okay? But except at the extremes, this doesn't imply any correlation with treatment. By the way, a lot of sociologists and anthropologists have looked at small communities. And it is the case that when you move from 20 to 30, from 30 to 40, truly, actually, some of these communities treat women worse, not better. It's kind of empowering the jerks. Is that okay? So there's only one woman, and then I feel bad, so I treat them nicely. But when there are two, oh, now, they are 30%. Oh, now we can actually treat them like crap. And so truly, that statistic is meaningless. The second one that we love is that we measure number of scandals reported by the media, which you understand that the media always reports actually the truth. And second is a real balance of what happens in the society, okay? So think about it. 3 years ago, Hollywood, by the way, most of the sexual harassment scandals 3 years ago were on colleges. We're here in universities. If you look at what has happened this year, there has been only one news related to that event. One, which was from a judge in California. That is a guy that let a person go with only 6 months of jail. So actually it had to do with a case that was 7 years old, whatever. One news. So does that mean that we have solved the problem? Let's think about Hollywood. In Hollywood, they usually are 50-50. Is that okay? And by the way, 3 years ago, we did not have that many scandals. So does that mean that that was a great place to work for women? By the way, the last one is to measure wage gaps. And the problem with wage gaps is to measure the exact same job with the exact same history. It's extremely hard to do. So this is, for example, let me tell you some of the things that people measure. This is MSCI. And they are computing the number of women that are on the boards. And you can see things are improving. They're increasing. Now we're at 15%. And the projection of an accelerated turnover implies that by 2020, we will get to a third, okay? By the way, I don't care how they do the projections, but 15% sounds like a little bit too little, but it's supposed to be improving. When you look at sexual harassment, these are the actual filings. Truly, the numbers are coming down in recent times. There are less and less filings. Which clearly says that we're improving the situation. Is that okay? Furthermore, wage gaps. If you look at the difference between salaries of men and women, actually they are becoming closer and closer. And furthermore, the number of percentage of households where the women earns more than the men is also going up. So clearly, I want to start another movement, which is the Me Macho Too. Because clearly the situation is better and I don't know why you are complaining. By the way, I have some countries where the wage of the women is equal to the wage of the men, which are the countries that we want to emulate. Like Philippines, Turkey, Panama, Guatemala, Somalia, Tanzania, Venezuela. Is that okay? Yeah, the Norwegians, they suck. Okay? Yes. These are the wrong statistics. These are completely the wrong statistics. And what happens is that then we fixate on the wrong statistic and we take actions and regulation for the wrong statistic. And guess what? Firms will respond to that with the wrong actions. They are not changing the situation. They are not. There are less filings, but that doesn't mean that we treat them better. So what are we doing? This is a joint work with the Media Lab. Oh, by the way, this is one case. This is one of the most, I remember reading the evidence from this case. These were about 3 females that actually were complaining about wage differences. When I read the evidence, I said, this is a super no-brainer. It was a complete, absolute no-brainer. And it took 8 years for them to actually prove it in the court system. So, so even in no-brainers, this is extremely hard to do. So what we're doing is, as again, these are the complaints. What we are doing is actually thinking about measuring women empowerment differently, and with this, I will kind of end and then take questions, okay? So first, the things that I want to do on all of these issues. First, there are 2 pillars. I want to measure in a non-intrusive manner. I mean, the example I'm gonna show you is not there yet, but we want to actually measure in such a way that people do not have to answer surveys. Surveys are very costly, by the way, you will get a survey from MIT. They're going to ask you. Please answer it. They're going to ask you what was your experience in the reunion. It matters a lot to them because how can they do this better if you don't give them your opinion? If you only get the hate mail, it's really difficult to improve this, okay? So they're going to ask you, you know, how was the meetings and the activities and the food, and so we need your. Now, when you get that email to do a survey, does anyone here suddenly get it? Woohoo! I'm so happy. I finally can do an MIT exam and pass it for sure. Like, what? You do not welcome that email because surveys are incredibly intrusive. So if I want to measure these activities, I need to measure this in a non-intrusive manner. And second, very importantly, we need to measure this in a continuous manner. I need to actually measure this every day, every week. We cannot wait for 3 years to understand what happened. It's more or less when I go to the doctor. I have had the same doctor for 21 years. And every time I go to her, she says, Roberto, you are older. Okay, check. You are bolder. Okay, check. Hence the cap. And you have gained, 3-4 pounds, which, by the way, my balance tells me every morning. So, it's a complete regret. It's an absolute, complete process of regret. I actually improved my behavior for about 2 weeks, and then after that, I forget. So if we don't measure this continuously, we're not going to change behavior. So those are on the collection of the data. Then there are 2 on the dissemination. We want to protect privacy, and these are very sensitive issues, like household stress. I don't want that to be used, so I sell you ice cream. Okay? Truly. So we have to protect this, very importantly. But second, I want this to be open source. See, when we produce the measures of inflation, Alberto and I don't think that either Alberto and I feel bad that we take those indexes and we sell it to the financial system. I don't feel any moral dilemma of measuring inflation better and then actually monetizing that. But can you imagine that we are able to measure human trafficking better? I would feel horrible of actually making money of that. In fact, I will like that to be a for-losing proposition. It has nothing to do with the money. And imagine that I have the ability, imagine that I succeed, and we create something that changes the way we treat women and the labor force. I understand that a lot of companies will pay for that, but I will feel horrible, actually. I would like to deploy this in a way that everybody actually can use it. So what this implies is implies a fifth one, which means that every measurement that we will produce will be imperfect. Every indicator will be imperfect. So let me tell you more or less how we're doing with women. We are measuring interruptions. So what we are doing, and by the way, we're in the third summer of measuring. I mean, how many Sloan Fellows I have? Raise your hand, please. Exactly. These people that are on the Sloan Fellows, they go through the summer, which is like putting them in forced labor, okay? It's just like a horrific experience. Is that okay? Is that a good assessment? Yeah, yes. I mean, she was super happy today. I mean, she cannot even smile now, okay? So, but we put them, right now it's very intrusive because they know we are recording them, but we put the microphones, and there are 2 programs that we're doing. We're not doing a Sloan Fellows this year. But the idea of this program is that we go through the process of recording, and we want to understand how do you interrupt each other, and if that has anything to do with your culture, or if that has to do anything with the gender. By the way, at the beginning of the recording, the first weeks, what happens is that everybody behaves super nicely. Like, Susan, what do you want to say? Yes. Can you repeat that? Oh, great. Cara, what a great opinion. So they behave like that, but the summer is such a miserable time. Is that okay? That their inner jerk comes out like, like alien. Is that okay? And after 2 weeks, they become their jerk selves. Is that okay? And then you shut up, and then you start like behaving like crazy. So men tend to interrupt women 4 times more than men interrupt men. By the way, women tend to speak between 15 to 30% less. Furthermore, women tend to use more conditionals to start the sentences. Like, for example, if you were to give directions, the men will say, turn left. And the women will say, Roberto, you might consider the possibility of turning left in the next light. Shit, just tell me turn left. Is that okay? Like, it's total. But because you use more conditional, you speak less, and there's more interruptions, actually the content per sentence is much, much smaller than the statistics I'm providing you. Another interesting thing is that the degree of interruption depends a lot on culture, okay? So on the men, you have Japanese, Germans, and Dutch. Because of their language, a lot of the content on the sentence is at the end of the sentence. They have been educated to stop and wait. So in German, and for example, in Japanese, you're going to say sky blue is not. I mean, so you kind of have to wait, no? Like, so you are like, okay, talk. And then you wait, there's a silence. Oh, he didn't say no, so it's actually blue. Okay, good. So now we can start a conversation. So even though they're speaking in English, what is very interesting is that they actually have, they leave the space. On the extreme side, you know, you can imagine it's all the Italians and the Spanish and Latinos. We are like interrupt like crazy. So people start a sentence and we just can estimate what you're going to say by the first noise. Is that okay? So if you ask a person in Latin America, you ask a person like, what do you think? And the guy, and you interrupt immediately. I really don't care what you have to say. I can just think about the interruption and just go along. So, but what is very interesting is that the distribution of women through time is changing. And what occurs is that women tend to get disconnected. They tend to get disengaged. This is the same thing for the summer. And what happens is that when you have these constant interruptions, then they migrate. And they tend to migrate to 2 types. So they either are very quiet and very, you know, allow a lot of interruptions. They do not contribute. And on the other extreme, they become super interrupters. Is that okay? Super aggressive. And what is interesting is that when the women become super aggressive, they behave exactly like the men. They interrupt women more frequently than they will interrupt men. And so the poor women in the extreme are. And in fact, what truly happens is, I mean, a lot of you women here are incredibly successful. So I don't know what type you are, but I will assume that you are kind of the assertive type, okay? Yeah, I mean, it's a shame that the labor market puts you in that condition to force you to choose that. So I know that we all have our little Latino inside, but it should be a choice. Our goal, and we are really far from that goal, is that we take those applications and we put them on a phone. And we do two things, that we bump the phones. And by bumping the phones, we're starting a conversation, we put it in front of us, and this becomes our microphone. This, at the end of the conversation, produces two statistics. One is the statistics of the organization. How are we in the organization treating women today? And not only women, minorities, different cultures, the supervisors versus the worker. So that we actually have a measurement about our behavior in those meetings. And therefore, by bumping the phones, we have a statistic for the organization, but also it gives me an immediate feedback to me. You were a super duper jerk. But because you are among jerks, you are just behave like the average of men. Is that okay? So, but the beauty of that is that it eliminates, I separate judgment from measurement. I don't know if interruptions are good or bad, I don't care. But they should not be generally gender biased. I do think, I mean, I am Latin American, I love interruptions. I cannot live without interruptions, okay? But since this is research, I am just trying to equally interrupt everybody. It should not be gender specific. It should not be. And for example, I know that Joanna is here in the room, but actually Joanna worked a lot on this project in particular here. So a lot of people has helped. Why I think this is important is because I think that we have the chance to change the way we behave. Psychologists call this unconscious bias. I actually think this is unmeasured biases. In fact, I am absolutely certain that after this conversation, you today will interrupt differently. Because everyone here, 100% of you, are good people. Just by just giving you a statistic of a group that is not even you, you're very likely to change your behavior. So if we have that continuous statistic, we will be able to change what we call unconscious bias because we are able to measure. Now, I cannot measure everything. Is that clear? This is a small part. I will not be able to change the way people behave in a bar. That is not going to change. But at least provide the tools so you can tell someone, I don't care how you behave in the bar, in this organization, that is unacceptable. So let me just finish about everything that we're doing at MIT. First, I want some lessons that I have learned from this. Behavior is not values, not whatsoever. The behavior of people responds to incentives and to measurement, and not to the values. If you separate the two, you realize that there's a tremendous distance between what we actually do and what we actually value. And this is one of the things that Jason and I have learned a lot from going through here. Second one is the unconscious bias are actually unmeasured biases. And I think that we have to, not everything can be resolved, but by providing continuous, non-intrusive measures, I think we can actually help a lot of what occurs. And finally, I think that the organizations of the future are those that actually eliminate all the boundaries of information. If you have very hard boundaries of information, you are bound to die. Those that actually understand themselves better, and this is not understanding only your clients or only your suppliers, those that are able to understand and measure themselves better are going to be able to take advantage of that. I think this research is totally MIT. It's multidisciplinary. I think it's important, but I think it's actually thankless. Everything that we are doing is very likely to be a bad paper in psychology, a very bad paper in economics, and a horrible paper in sociology. I mean, these are bad papers. These are bad papers. But I do think that we need to write them. And I think that that's what differentiates MIT from other places. I don't know how many of you were on convocation on Thursday. Raise your hand if you were on convocation. Very few, yes. But actually, one of the things that happened on convocation is that we have an alumni, Lorenzo Mendoza. I don't know if anyone knows Lorenzo. Lorenzo is a Venezuelan, by all measures, extremely successful individual that instead of actually leaving that country, he decides to stay there and fight for the country, not because it's easy, Not because it will improve his life, it's because that's the only way to improve the life of others. And I find every time I meet someone from Sloan incredibly inspiring. The fact that instead of when we face a challenge, when we see injustice, when we feel that something is wrong, when I am amazed about you guys, is you always run toward that. You don't shy from the challenge. You don't. And even though everything that I do is measure the worst of humankind, and truly discrimination, mistreatment of women, mistreatment of human beings, and everything that I do is about the badness of the humankind, I am extremely, extremely optimistic. We're in the best time in the history of humankind. 1,000 years ago, every country had a slavery. Every country actually had women were irrelevant. Their opinions were irrelevant. About 1,000 years ago, we have public killings in every country. Everybody had guns, and today, very few remain. Very, very, very few remain. And we have done this improvement without any measurement and without any guidance. We have achieved that because of people exactly like you. So let me just thank you, first, for being here. Second, for all the support that people like you have provided for this research. This will not have happened without people that actually have been willing to finance a lot of this. I am not planning to make money from this, so I rely entirely from the support from the alumni. And so thank you for everyone that actually has helped, either the Sloan School for that, MIT for that, and thank you everybody for actually the help that you will provide in the future. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Yes.
Buenos dias, Roberto.
Yes, it's
How you
great
doing?
to see you again. Great to see you again.
So thank you for your kind words, but I'll take you up on this now. You may know this, but I'm on the alumni board, and I've been tasked with looking at diversity, the alumni base, and how we can make sure, I guess, we can improve diversity at MIT and at Sloan. Similarly, at work, you see a big push in corporate America for diversity and inclusion. And the question I get at work is people will ask, even some Sloanie ask me the same thing, is like, what is the value proposition? What's the business case? All right? They say, okay, we good doers, but why?
But what a great question. Why should we care? And it's in fact, for anything, from the environment all the way to the community impact and so on. So again, I do think it's a problem of measurement. So let me translate that to measurement. If we treat our workers very badly, at some point in time, that's going to have a negative consequence for my company. Is that clear? So if I treat workers very badly, at some point in time, people will know that I treat people very badly in my company, and it will be very difficult for me to hire anyone. Is that clear? So in the future, there is a cost. In the future, there is a negative return. But the problem is that we have no idea when it's coming. We have no idea how big it is. And therefore, we assume we tend to act as if it's zero. So the value proposition, unfortunately, because it's badly measured, it's hard to know today what it is. Let me give you another example. When you are at home and you are deciding to work on that PowerPoint presentation, this actually happened to me. This is a true story between my wife, my kids, and I. Is that okay? So I had an incredibly important meeting the following day for fundraising. These projects are extremely, extremely, extremely costly, and I need a lot of help. So I actually have sold my organs in like 20 times in different countries. I have no more organs to sell. And because they know my health, they are less and less valuable through time. Is that okay? So I need it. Your organs are super healthy, so mine are like crap. So I'm starting to sell the organs from my wife now. But to me, the following meeting was extremely, extremely important. My wife knew that. My wife wanted me to be successful. My kids wanted for me to be successful. But I made a promise the day I married my wife that I will never, ever work during dinner. Never. And we have never, I actually unless I'm not at home because I'm traveling, I try never ever to break that promise. And that day I was working like crazy on my PowerPoint presentation. On my presentation, I only had 10 minutes to convince the person. Everybody has done that. And my young daughter comes and says, Dad, dinner is served. I say, shh, crap. Dinner is served. So I calm down, and I think that I ate in 1 nanosecond. I think that that's the new definition of nanosecond, okay? It's the time that I spend in the table. I ate super fast. By the way, my kids ate super fast because they knew that I needed the time. My wife, oh my God. Let's open a bottle of wine. I could hear that, like crushing, like. I'll open it for you. No need. Just stay there. Let's drink the whole bottle of wine. Like, what? The whole bottle of wine? So I got drunk like in 20 seconds. Then my wife says, at dinner, he tells my kids, do you want pancakes for dessert? Pancakes? The dinner took about 2 hours and a half. I'm telling you, I was dying. And when we ended the dinner, my wife said, do not ever break the promise. Because truly, think about the transaction we do. If I devote those 2 hours to the PowerPoint, I can measure perfectly what are the benefits. What is the cost of 2 hours less with my kids? How many less smiles 10 years from now will those 2 hours cost on my daughter? Hard to measure? We tend to assume it's zero. So when somebody asks you about the business case, typically it's because they don't understand the cost nor the probability of these events. To be honest, we cannot continue the way we are. We can't. Our political system clearly is screaming for help. Our societies are screaming for help. And we have underestimated tremendously how much we talk to each other. One question. Yes.
Oh, thank you. That was wonderful. I just had a question about the implications of this first bullet, behaviors, not values. Because I guess one question is, what if we do actually measure values and people are aware of their values and they can see the misalignment? And if that still won't help, then are values irrelevant? How do we, this seems like a major problem.
Yes. So truly, let me finish with that question. There's another session coming. So I do think that if we can measure our values better and then we realize how we put our time and our actions, I think that will bring a lot to our changes. And we will become kinder, for example, because we will know that we want to be kind, we want to be respectful, we want to be helpful, we want to care. So I think that by being able to measure values better, we will be able to actually align our behavior with our own values. I think that I will aspire to be able to get to there, but before I get to there, I want to measure the processes of the things that we dislike, and that I think we agreed that dislike. So this is more or less what it is. So let me finish there. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.